Okay, welcome back to the Meat Dudes. I am Evan, and I'm here joined by Tyler McCann of Wyoming Cowboy Cuts. How you doing, Tyler?
Yeah, good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to chat with you today. On our previous phone call, we were talking. You do a lot of stuff. You do events. You do. You're a rancher. You have a restaurant background, and you have a lot of different points of view on beef that I was really interested by. And I thought it was really cool, man. So I'm super excited to chat with you. And so, give us a little bit of background about Wyoming Cowboy Cuts and yourself and how you kind of got to here.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, a little bit of a jack of all trades, master of none for sure. We started a direct to consumer business, and we started feeding just our local community in 2019. And then when 2020 hit, it totally changed our perspective on everything. We learned a lot, and we've since continued to grow and change our direct to consumer business here locally. Um, so that's one side of it. We have a commercial cattle ranch that we run 600 mother cows on. And so that's still the bulk of our business. That's our Hancock Ranch. And that's my wife's family. And I actually was not a rancher. I married into a ranching family. Yeah, I'm a first generation rancher, married to a fifth generation rancher, and we are trying to do everything we can to keep the sixth generation on the land.
And I think that's cool. We almost sometimes we need a little bit of that fresh blood, or say we. I'm not a rancher, but
Yeah.
the industry needs a little bit of that fresh blood, and you do a lot of different things, different ways, and you can kind of tell that sometimes if it's just handed down to handed down to handed down, you kind of do things almost the same way. So how is that? How is that a little bit different? How do you inject a little bit of your uniqueness into this business and into the beef industry?
Yeah, so I grew up in downtown Denver,
Mm-hmm.
4 blocks from Children's Hospital.
Yeah.
And so I came from a very different perspective.
Yeah.
And then my uncle had Michelin rated restaurants in Vail, Colorado.
Wow.
And I was able to, very fortunate to be able to go and visit Uncle Kevin and grow up on the restaurant side of it, enjoying and eating very high-end food, but not really knowing how a steak got on a plate. And I ultimately ended up in the horse business. That's what my family had done. And in the process of that, ended up with a rancher for a wife. And so the more I learned, I don't know if you can imagine this, but the learning curve on ranching is very steep. If you do not grow up in it, it is very steep. And so I was coming from that foodie restaurant side. I I saw a whole different perspective, and like you and I talked, I always say I saw both sides of the steak, and I learned what it takes, and it is literal blood, sweat, and tears to get that finished product to the plate. And so then in doing all of that, I learned how the beef business would fit into our commercial business because they are very different, and there are a lot of limiting factors on how producers do what they do and why they do it the way they do it. So learning that, then I branched out and started seeing what the outer limits of that direct to consumer beef business would be.
Yeah, we talk to a lot of ranchers all over the U.S. and I feel like a lot of the small ones are really trying to do that direct to consumer because there's so much competition with the big guys.
Yeah.
Now, how does that? How do you do it, and why do you think that's like the future of beef? Like, it's it because we talked about knowing where your beef comes from and feeding your community. Those are big things for you and
Yeah.
for a lot of the ranchers we talk to, right? So is that part of this whole thing? Is like direct to consumer, go out and know your farmer. I mean, how important is that?
Yeah, so I think that for from a rancher's perspective, a lot of what you do is based on the geography that you have, and
Yeah.
so where we are, it's high mountain desert. We are one of the driest places in North America. If you were to draw an X across the state of Wyoming,
Yep.
right where that intersects is about dead center is about 8 miles northeast of our ranch door.
Oh, really?
So we are literally in the middle of nowhere, and
Yeah.
it's like the second or third driest place in North America. So everything that we have done has had to adapt to that. For
Yes.
that's the primary thing that we're working with. We have very dry, less than 9 inches of total accumulation of rain all year. So you
Wow.
get more in a week than we do in a year.
Yeah.
And so that's our biggest factor
Yeah.
the environment in which we live, and that is how we, develop all of our decisions. So then after that is when you start breaking down, into those different markets. And so, for a consumer, they need to start understanding why the rancher is doing what they're doing, and then that goes into some of the different feeding programs. And there are some very fortunate people who have started an entire program based around a breeding, as far as a pedigree that they're looking for, whether that may be the Wagyu side, the purebred Angus side, those kind of things. There may be someone who has started it around an ideology of like a feeding program, like a regenerative side, where maybe they're going after a crossbred animal, but just a specific grazing program. There's people like myself that we are in a common allotment, which means that our summer range is 56 square miles in one pasture. Okay. So that's larger than some counties in other states. And so we're in there with three other people. And so those are all limiting fact. And we have wild horses on top of that. So I can't do like a rotational grazing program because wild horses go through every fence they ever see.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I can't do a rotational program even if you take the wild horses out of it, because sometimes my cows have to walk 2 miles to water each day and they only go to water every other day. So, when you start to look into those kind of things now, like if you go down to Florida, for instance, which is one of the biggest beef producing states in the country, you're looking at cows per acre when you purchase land there. Here, we're looking at between 30 and 50 acres per cow to make that cow through a year. So, when you start to understand that those are the things that go into the decisions that the farmers and the ranchers make, then you
Yes.
can make a better decision as a consumer as to, you and I visited some about the things that we have readily available to us here in central Wyoming. We grow a lot of beer barley for Coors Brewing in Colorado. In our county specifically is where a lot of the beer barley is contracted for Coors. And so when that barley, there's a couple of things that happens with that barley harvest, which actually just started last week. If that barley resprouts, then they won't take it. So if you get a late summer rain and that barley starts to resprout, that's not usable for the beer. It won't malt. And so then the other side of it is if that barley has a really dry spring, it can come on and get too much protein later in the growth period. And that makes the beer froth too much and the company won't take it. So now you have both of these reject barleys that
Yeah.
are on a truck. They're very high protein and they need to do something besides sit in a landfill and off gas, these negative emissions for the environment. the, greenhouse gases and things like that, when these start rotting, just go through the roof. And so we can now use this wonderful machine that we have, this cow, to convert that undigestible protein for a person, or an unused protein, into an amazing high quality beef. So, and then the other thing that we have a lot of access to here in central Wyoming is sugar beets, and the remnant, the leftover,
Uh,
the
there's
beet pulp. There you go.
okay,
Yeah,
people.
yeah. When you have that leftover beet pulp from the production of sugar, then that is a really high quality fiber that the cattle can digest, and it has that sugar component to it. So cattle do really well on the remaining beet pulp if you can get a hold of that. Plus, there's also the juice that comes off when they're washing, and that can be added to dry feeds for a sugar component in a complete mixed ration for cattle. So when you start looking into that, and then you go, okay, now why did they do it the way they do? You go, there's like a lot to that.
No, absolutely. I mean, talking about the terroir, that's a that's a big thing. I know that you're talking about, and that you mentioned a lot when we previously spoke.
Yeah.
And so, all of this comes down to, the what happens at the end on the plate, right? So what are we trying to get the consumers to really understand with knowing this? Is it know your farmer, know the terroir? Is that's how it's going to end up on the plate? I mean, what's the takeaway from understanding all of this?
Yeah, so for me, the hierarchy, I think there's so much about regenerative right now, and there's so much that people get really excited about. Wagyu, purebred Wagyu, Wagyu cross. There is a lot of grass-fed and grass-finished. That's also a big thing. And so I think the big thing for people to start to sort through, and rather than focus on some of those things that don't necessarily, that maybe aren't capable in your area, focus more on, okay, beef. The hierarchy would be: beef is better than no beef, American beef is better than beef, and then local beef is better than all, right? And so then that very top little piece is that last 1% that you can really dial in to your personal preference. I always tell customers to find something that they enjoy the flavor of.
Yeah,
Um, because if you go out and you invest, this is a very large investment in your family or your personal food security. And so if you have taken that step and you're going to buy a quarter or a half or a whole beef from a local producer, you need to go out and you need to find something that you enjoy eating. Because if you eat all the steaks and you eat a bunch of the ground beef, and then there's like all of these things left in the freezer, and you're like, I'm not sure what to do with them, you've wasted that whole, your money, that time, that animal's portion of it. So, you know, get out and talk to these people. Like, there's some people in my community, it's very difficult to sell a completely grass-fed and grass-finished animal because, this is very old school, and there's a little bit of a stigma around it. But as people get more aware of what they're eating, even here in my very small community, excuse me, they are more apt. They want to know that this animal wasn't in a feedlot. It didn't have this miserable life. And so that's the story that we tell, is that, they're always out in a pasture. They're always grazing on grass, and we feed them these byproducts of other food industries that they can now convert into that high quality product. So I think when they start to understand the story of why it is the way it is, they
yeah,
can feel really comfortable. I'm using something from these other industries that maybe it's not regenerative, but it is upcycling in a very fantastic way.
Yes, man. Okay, that kind of brought it full circle for me right there. I liked how you wrapped that up because there are these trigger words or these exciting words, the grass fed and even Wagyu. Like we love Wagyu beef. We're big proponents of Wagyu beef. But if you don't like that or you don't like that flavor, you don't have to eat it. But what I love what you're saying is find someone local, understand what they do, and that it doesn't have to have the regenerative or the grass fed or the organic label, because like what you're doing isn't necessarily regenerative. It wouldn't fall totally under that, but like you said, you're upcycling so much that would just be wasted. So we've heard stories of people who can't do organic because of course maybe they just can't afford it, but everything they do, they can't afford the label, but everything they do is organic. So it's not
Yeah.
just about the labels, it's about like how people are raising this beef. And I totally agree. We love I love your scale of beef, American beef, and even Wagyu. To me, Wagyu falls under that. We get a lot of pushback when we post about Wagyu beef because people are like, I eat American beef. And I'm like, well, most of the Wagyu we talk about is raised in America.
Yeah.
We love American Wagyu beef, full blood, purebred,
Yeah.
50-50. But I really appreciate kind of how you brought that around full circle, where you don't need some of these trigger words. You just need to understand where this beef comes from. You gotta
Yeah.
know where your meat comes from, and know the farmer and know what they're doing, know the story. And that's half the reason why we do what we do, because meeting people like you, like, oh, I didn't know that the Wyoming Cowboy Cuts had that. That's
Right.
really cool what they're doing. So I just appreciate that, man. I do love some grass fed beef too. I'll take it,
Yeah, oh
but
yeah. I'll tell
there's great
you,
stuff out there. It's
one of the funnest grass-fed beefs that I've ever had comes from right here in our county. A
Mhm.
friend of mine, he's a monster. I mean, this guy's just a mountain, and his hands are like you can't tell him no, right? Like he's that guy. And he kept telling me, he's like, I got this grass-fed. You're doing that beef thing, and you need to try my grass-fed. I'm like, yeah, oh yes, yes, okay, let's try it. And he brought me like a 5-year-old cow that had not been bred back. She'd had one calf when she was young, and then,
really,
for whatever, whether it was exposure or something with her, she would not breed back, but she was just sloppy fat. And he brought me this cow, and I was like, all right, dude. So we butcher her, and he brings me these steaks, and I guarantee you they were prime.
yeah. That's
Absolute prime.
why.
And so
Why? Why do you think they were like? Why do you think they're so marbled?
So I think it's so there's a lot goes into that.
Mhm.
And you do like on the Wagyu side, obviously there's a lot of genetics that play into
Yes,
that. But on the
absolutely.
more commercial side, I think it's lifestyle and diet and then genetics maybe is towards the end of that. And so they are on this river bed that's up. It's the Sweetwater River, and
Uh-huh.
it's these very tall, lush, sweet grasses, and it literally, and the age. There's a lot
Yeah,
of countries that think that we're just crazy for eating anything under 5 years old.
yeah.
Um, y- you
Oh yeah.
know, it,
There's a
it,
lot of dairy cows, right? We eat a lot of late dairy cow or older dairy cows, and some of that meat is so
Oh
delicious.
yeah. So
Oh,
that's another fun one. Remind me of that. There's a lady in the Northwest that is doing primarily all old dairy cows. And last year her steaks were second at our beef roundup. They
really?
are that old dairy cow is no joke, man. When
It's
they come
it's
off of the production line and you get them on a ration of like, and she's really got it dialed in. Like she worked for several years to get her ration just right. And she turns these old dairy cows out in a pasture, rotationally grazes them, and then has some sort of a finishing ration that they're on as well.
yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal steaks. Yeah, totally.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Well, that one older 5-year-old grass fed cow, that was grass finished, right? Grass fed.
absolutely. Yeah, she
Oh,
had
and did
never
that just
had she
wow.
they gathered her that week right off of the range, right off the river bottom there. brought her to
Yeah.
the house, dropped her off here, and we got her processed. And it was fantastic. I think we hung it 21 days maybe, which
Really?
for a grass finish, that's crazy. But
Yeah.
there was so
You're
much
losing
fat
it.
cap, we were able to
Wow.
really age her out.
That's wild. Do you think it's just do you think it was just like a random like you know how I think we mentioned in our last podcast hasn't aired yet, we were talking about how some animals are almost just like pro athletes. Like you just get a random crazy pro athlete in there and they're just super marbled and beautiful. Do you think it was a random thing, or do you think it was like the sweet grass?
I would have said maybe random if I'd only had the one, but then he and I did it
Oh,
several more times after that. And, to varying degrees, maybe the next one didn't grade prime, but it would have just been that very high end of choice. And, same flavor profile,
wow.
fantastic, great tenderness, So any of the things that I think we saw enough of it to know there was definitely something there. Obviously there is a little bit of individual genetics that go into it, but yeah, he did it multiple times. It was fantastic. We called it our Sweetwater edition, and people went nuts over it. They loved it.
Man, dude. Well, you've got. I love your stories from your beef roundup. So you work with a lot of people all over the world, all over the U.S., all over the world, that submit to your competition. What are some of the craziest things you've seen in the beef world?
Yeah.
Finishing or ranching. What? Give me something.
Yeah, so I think the dairy cows, that was a really interesting one. Then there's the Longhorn Angus crosses or Longhorn Corriente crosses.
Uh-huh.
They've actually won before. That was a really fascinating cross as well. I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of what wins our competition is you have to have something that stands out.
Yes.
We don't see the kind of there's a lot of pride in the purebred Angus, purebred Hereford, and
Mhm.
those are all wonderful things, and we need those. But that really far outlier is like when you put 12 of those amazing steaks or 15 of those amazing steaks in front of one person, you have to have something that really pops, and I think
Yeah.
that's what gets them.
Yeah.
The Wagyu is up there, and they do very well. Um, then the carrot finished is obviously an amazing one. They did not win last year, but those guys are fantastic. It's Santa Carita beef out of California. They ship all over the country. It's carrot finished beef. It's so cool.
They just have. I mean, do they grow carrots on their farm, or do they use excess carrots? What do they do?
So that's one of those things is like when I heard about it, I was like, wait a minute, what? Like, why are these guys buying carrots to feed their cat? Like, how does this happen? So
Wow.
actually, they're not buying them. They are in the county in California where the baby carrot was developed, and they get it's the largest carrot growing county in the world, apparently, and they get all of the reject and all of the sometimes they're harvested a little earlier, a little late, so they don't fit the standards that they're looking for. And these guys literally get a semi load of carrots every day, and these cattle are out in a pasture. It's really cool. He has a great social media. You can watch him feed these cattle all the time. So they graze them out in the hills of California, and when they get to a certain weight, they come in and they have like one or two of these particular finishing pastures, and it does like a semi just drives in and dumps the whole load of carrots on the ground, and these steers just walk up and eat carrots all throughout the day,
That's
and they love
awesome.
it. They
And
love
they're
it.
using right. They're using that like what imperfect,
Yep.
vegetables and stuff. And that's oh man, that's crazy. You kind of to swing back. You talked about the cow being a machine, and I like that. To take something that would be waste and actually produce it into meat. And that's what I think a lot of people don't recognize or realize, or they think that this animal is terrible for the environment. But really, I mean, what are we doing with all this stuff? No one's buying these carrots in the grocery store, so they're just going to waste. No one's using that barley or for the Coors Light, so that's just going to go to waste.
Yep.
So, what is it about this animal that that allows it to do that? And how good is the cow for the environment?
Yeah, so they're so adaptable. You look
Yeah,
at these cattle that are in these marshes in Louisiana where, nothing is growing at scale that people can use. All of these grasses, all of this marshland where you couldn't build on, they're down there and they're thriving. Just outside the Everglades in Florida, they're thriving. Then you come and you drop them off right here in the driest spot in North America, and they're thriving. So the adaptability and that genetic selection is a huge part of why they are so adaptable. And our ancestors, they had to live off of what they could do. Like
yeah,
that's why we're not eating Jaguar burgers or bear burgers, right? So
yeah,
they had to have, and you're seeing Buffalo come into the mix a little bit more all the time. And there is some romanticism about that. But I've talked to guys that have done both and do both. And they're like, dude, Buffalo is so tough. Like you can build a pin out of complete iron, like from the floor all the way up, and one can hit it on one side, and 100 yards away, they'll bend a pipe. And so there's those kind of factors that come into it of like, okay, what can we reasonably manage? You look back 50 years ago with like my wife's family, and they were driving those cattle to the railroad. They didn't have any corrals. They could manage them, and it was open range. So,
wow,
you know, the adaptability of them, the shorter genetics where we can select for those. In my life, I'll see 20 or 30 generations of cattle born. And so we can manipulate that genetics very easily without any kind of like scientific stuff. Like this cow lived on the range really and did really well. Let's breed her to this bull that lived on the range and did really well. So the simplicity of the operating system, is a big thing.
yeah,
And so they do. They convert all of this unusable fiber. They don't need anything special. They can go out and they can adapt to those grasses that are in your area, and natural selection, they will start to thrive in that area. And so I think that's a big reason. So then now you go into where we have bastardized that some. We have definitely taken advantage of that brilliant creation that we were given, and we do. We feedlot some, and I'm not a proponent of feedlots, but I am also not. They are a necessary evil. Um, there is some of that production value that comes out of that, and so I think that. As we start to get a little smarter as consumers, because we are all 100% consumers, but we're not all necessarily producers, right? And so as the consumer gets a little more conscientious, like we talked about in the beginning, because of my situation, I can't necessarily do a rotational grazing or a regenerative grazing setup, but I can do all those upcycling things that can still make you a fantastic product. So if we come together and we visit about it a little bit, and you're like, wait a second, I love the way this beef tastes. I love that you do as many things as you can to make it better for the environment and for flavor and, all of those things. Then it's like, this could work. This is awesome. I like this.
Dude, I agree, and that's beef gets such a bad rep, and it's a lot of that is the big feedlots, and we know like it is a necessary evil now because we need to produce food for people to eat. So
Sure.
on that aspect, I understand it, but there are a lot of so many of those cows that go into the feedlots. A lot of them come from local farmers who are doing great things and doing things and probably upcycling and then now they got to get them to the feedlot, right? So, is there a world where we don't have feedlots? Is there a world where we can just go, where we can feed enough people without having these feedlots? And what would that look like? Am I crazy?
No, no, I do. I think it is. I think it's very plausible. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's, is that 3 decades? Is that 7 decades away? Like, what does that look like? I'm not sure. But you look at what a Will Harris from White Oaks Pastures is doing. Polyface Farm. The Salatons, they're doing Joel and Daniel. They're doing amazing things. And so I do, and even where we are, like I see, that's our finishing protocol is like I have used on our farm is 330 acres. Our hay fields consist of 220 of that 330. So now in that other 110 acres, I've got, about 70 acres that aren't developed with houses and barns and corrals and stuff. I've got those now fenced off into grazing areas that were either too rocky to be hayed or too subby to be hayed. And so, now we've regenerative and rotationally grazed those pastures, and now they went from producing not hay to producing beef, right?
Yes, yes.
It's so I think and now that's obviously still it's only between 10 and 20% of our business,
Mhm.
but if every rancher were to look at those things where they can maximize the value even on their commercial herds, that was a big decision for me personally. Like we talked about it. You and I were talking about, I do have an area on our ranch where we could do a Wagyu cross. Like we could buy all Wagyu bulls and put them where on our replacement heifers, they are in a pasture all to themselves so that I know the genetics of the bulls that breed them for their safety, right?
Yeah,
And so there's always that possibility there. It wasn't something that we've pursued yet, but what we're trying to do is maximize the value of our commercial herd and recapture some of that commercial value. And so that's how we started our entire beef business is I had one steer. He was an accident. He was born in a snowstorm before we got everything in. Thankfully, he survived, but he lost his ears, his nose, and his tail froze off, right?
wow.
And so we're looking at this calf, and he's out there like thriving, but it's obvious what's happened, right? And so when we take that animal through the commercial sale ring, they are not going to pay us for him.
Yeah.
If a good calf is
Why
selling
is that? Why is that? Just
because these buyers look at hundreds of thousands of cattle, per year, and
yeah,
that's a sign of stress at birth. And so to go into that commercial model, now they are more suspect of him because he is more apt to have sickness or lameness.
yeah.
And
Okay.
so they're going to dock us for that animal.
Yeah.
But in our setting where we had this little pasture behind the house that we weren't able to cut hay on, we just stuck him back there and we did like grandma and grandpa did. We went to the co-op and we bought a bag full of corn and we threw it over the fence to him every day. When you went to check his water, you gave him a coffee can of grain, and when the grain was all gone, we butchered him
Yeah.
and it was fantastic. So now
Mhm.
we've taken that animal that, it wasn't going to bring 15, $1,600 like the rest of them that we had that year. He was going to bring like two or 300, and
Yeah.
we've recaptured that value. So,
Yeah.
when you start looking at systems like that that people can put in place, is it more work? Absolutely. It
Yeah.
is. When I
It,
have a really particularly hard spring and I have 30 of that steer, then all of a sudden you go, okay, now wait a minute. We just lost $30,000 because of a cold night. I think I'm going to make a lot of beef, right?
yeah. Um,
So when you look
that's,
at it like that, then
yeah.
all of a sudden you go, so not necessarily that we're not going to change the whole system overnight. So let's
Yep.
let's work with
Totally.
what we have. We still have payments to make, and we need that big check at the end of the year. But then let's start to break down a few things, and similar to what we were talking about earlier. A lot of people in my area are very shy about grass finished beef. So now here we take this other product and we say, okay, here's a beef that you enjoy, and it checks all these other boxes. As they become more aware of what's happening, they go, I really like that. And
Yeah.
that's I have customers that have been with us for since 2019, and they're like, we don't order beef at restaurants anymore because it doesn't compare.
I know. We hear that too. I love that. I
Yeah,
love that. And so, why are people scared of grain fed beef? Like, what is it out there? Is it poor grains? Is it force feeding? Like, what's
yeah.
the stigma?
Yeah, and so there is a lot of that in this industrial system, when they're standing there, and it breaks my heart to drive by some of these feedlots, and like that was one of the things that I had to check a box on for me, was that okay, they're not standing around in these pens all day with just one option of what to eat. So that was a personal decision. When it rains, it just looks horrific when you drive by and you see them all just standing in this muddy muck thing. So I think that we have a little bit of an outrage culture. And so when they see those pictures and stuff, yeah, those are the rough days.
Yeah,
And it's easy to glorify that, and they do, in places. You look at, like, I looked at corn this morning. Corn's 3.98 a bushel. I mean, these guys are buying as much corn as they can get.
yeah,
So I think that that's the one thing that it is, and there's definitely some sickness when you limit their diet to only one option.
yeah,
You do have that sickness that starts to come in when you have them all in a small area. Now your antibiotic use goes up. So there is, and I appreciate that people are aware of it. But I'll give you an example. I was on with Dr. Robert Kiltz the other day, and he said, "How much antibiotic do you use?" In our operation, I have bottles of antibiotic that are the last shot that I went to give. I had to go call the neighbor and borrow a shot because my bottle of oxytetracycline was 2 years expired.
yeah. And
So
is it because they're spread out and they're
yeah,
eating?
yeah,
They're healthy, right? If you put a bunch of people in the same room and fed them one thing, they're not going to be as healthy as spreading them out and letting them run and letting
absolutely.
them choose
Yeah,
to
and
eat.
that's the luxury that I have, is I have time and space and grass, and so those are if you were to tell that to someone else, they're like, there's no way that I could run an animal for 2 to 3 years, um, because I'm having to feed them. And
Yeah,
so, again, we go back to what is the scenario and why did they do it the way they do it? If I give 10 shots in a year, that's a bad year for me. That's a lot of sickness on our ranch. That's 600 head.
yeah,
So, by the time you have a cow and a calf, now you're like 11, 1,200 head, and they're getting 10 shots. And that's more than likely not just one shot per animal. That's probably five animals that got two shots. You
yeah.
know,
And, yeah,
yeah, so
yeah,
that part is so easy for the media and the outrage to just take a hold, and like, oh, these guys are just out there giving them shots every day. there are places where they do regularly have to use antibiotics to keep an animal alive or healthy or help fight off something, but it's not the average. I mean, I know guys that they're like me. They don't even know where their bottle of, this baseline antibiotic. It's not this elaborate, new mRNA and all of this stuff that we hear about. Like, I couldn't even tell you where my bottle of oxytetracycline, like they don't even use that for people anymore because it's so baseline.
That's no, that's good to hear, man. That's good to hear because it's just you hear that so much, just the misconceptions and there, I think you broke it down pretty well. Is if they're crammed into a certain a certain amount of space, there's going to be more sickness. When we travel farms that we know and we know the farmer, it's funny because they have this big farm and they're like, see this little pen over here, that's the animals that got sick and we had to use antibiotics on these
Yeah,
animals because you're a humane person and you want to help this animal. You're not going to not use an antibiotic if an animal is sick. But but like you said, I think there's a limit. Like I don't want to know that every single cow
yeah,
in the herd is getting an antibiotic because that means that something's wrong, right? Like
yeah.
that means we're doing something functionally wrong. It's not working. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's that misconception that, now that they're in this pen, they're getting fed. And there are feed through antibiotics. There are liquids that can go in water, and those all break down to the convenience and the design for how that application is. But yeah, it's not the problem that people think it is when you really break it down. So again, goes back to talk to them. Why do they do the way they do? I would love to have like a half a Wagyu cross or a purebred of some sort, and it's not feasible in our area. So
That no, I get it, and that's another thing I might start adding to our repertoires. Ask what they do, why they do it. I think that's a good thing because we always like to say know your farmer, go out and shake their hand, and not everybody can do that, but if you can, I really think you should because you're going to understand the quality of the meat. You're going to get to look the
yeah,
person in the eye, tour the farm, see how they do these things, and then understand. I like the choices that they make. I like the choices they make of feed that they're putting in their cows is going into my body.
yeah.
We're so passive with food these days. We go to the grocery store and we're plucking through all these ribeyes, and it's like, oh my god, dude, like that was like 16 cows you just went
Yeah.
through. Like, oh my gosh, you don't even realize it. But
Yeah.
you know, it's
Yeah,
it's a
it is. Just everybody needs an afternoon, get out in the sun. And so like that's the thing. Most of these really reputable people like myself that if somebody calls and they're like they have questions, I'll answer all their questions. If they want to come out and look, yeah, come out and look. Um, so you need an afternoon out. You need an afternoon with a family. Like get them off of the screens and go walk around in the grass. Yeah, and you're gonna feel so much more secure about your decision. Like, why am I spending $4 a pound more for this steak than? And when it takes out all of that noise of like, oh, I have to do this or I have to stay away from that all of a sudden you have like one less decision. Like I know this is why I buy the beef that I buy. Done. Don't have
yeah,
to worry about it again. And then the coolest part is like it for you guys, when somebody comes over and they now have some of those preconceived notions
yeah.
and you feed them that steak that you know the story about, all of a sudden they're like, dude, what is like, where have I missed out on this?
Yes, because it's funny when people want, I believe when people want organic or they want grass fed, they want they're asking for that, I think, in general, because they think that it's been raised better, right? They're like, oh, it must have been raised better if it's grass fed, it must have been raised better if it's organic. Well, it might not have that label, but let me tell you how our beef is raised, and once they hear that story, I'm like, why do you want, why do you want grass fed? And they always do kind of say that, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
better, it's healthier raised. And it's like, okay, well, once you tell them that story, they kind of change their tune and go, well, I might give that a shot. Actually, that doesn't sound bad. I'm like, yeah, I know this farmer personally. We get 99% of our beef from this guy. It's pasture raised 80%. It's finished on local barley that they grow themselves. I mean, like, what else do you want?
Yeah.
Everything is well done, and they care about it. So, I think that's just breaking those misconceptions, right? It may not be have the organic label, but guess what? They do things the right way, and so there might be farms out there that have an organic label that aren't even doing things the right way. But
Yeah.
they're organic.
Well,
So,
and that is like that's one of those things that if you have no idea how to start this, right? And I used to get this when I went to the farmers markets because that's the way to get your name out, right? And so I can tell everybody the story, and I can have them on my team, and I can have them like rooting for me, like we love this. It doesn't necessarily convert to sales, right? And
yeah,
so like I have them cheering for me, and they want me to win, and I say, so what can I get you? And there was always two things that they said. It was either ribeye or hamburger, right?
yeah.
And so that's what I love like about what you're doing. Like I never had someone walk up and say, I love your story. Can I get a Zabuton? Like
Right.
I,
I
I have
know.
I have one dude in 5 years of going to farmers markets ask for a tongue.
Wow. You know, and I mean, I think it's only our job because as you're saying, you're upcycling, barley and beets, you're doing all of that. Now, what we need to do is let people know there's so many more different cuts in this whole animal, so
Yeah,
it doesn't go to waste, right? I bet there's a ton of waste. Like most of the stuff goes to grind and goes to burgers, and burgers are great, but have you ever had, a Zabuton or a
yeah,
Delmonico or a flat iron? And there's so many different ways to prepare these things.
yeah,
That's but you're right. When people come up, they go, "Oh yeah, just give me a ribeye." And it's like,
yeah,
man, ribeyes are great. I love
yeah.
ribeyes, but
If the pig was all bacon or the beef was all ribeyes, you wouldn't be talking to me. I'd be on a yacht with all my other buddies, right? Like,
right, I know it doesn't
you
work
know,
like
yeah,
that.
when you start breaking down that, like, okay, at an inch thick, I go an inch and a quarter on all my custom cuts. You're gonna get about 18 to 22 ribeyes out of that animal, right?
Yeah,
And so then when you start breaking it down for people, and that's one of our things that we do a lot with customers is go through that cut sheet. You have to have it cut the way you're gonna cook. Um,
it's a great point.
and so if you're new to the whole idea of buying a quarter or a half, a lot of times on quarters you don't have many options just because it's really difficult for the butcher and the farmer and the rancher to do that.
Yeah,
But typically when you do a half, you're going to have at least a few guidelines. There's always some bumpers out there for how you can have that beef cut. But yeah, I
yeah,
you know, I have the empty nester cut, which is ground beef and steaks, man. That's it. Like maybe a roast or two. Which for those people, it's awesome. They give a lot of the ground beef to the kids that have moved out for a holiday present, and everybody's
totally.
happy.
Yeah,
For me, the butchers hate my cut sheet because I really push the limits. I want to know, are you going to cut a Merlot? Are you going to cut Denvers? I'm a lover of all things Chuck, so I'm into those far out Chuck cuts. I
what's your, what's your favorite check cut?
Oh man, so it goes around and around. Like it changes. I vacillate between Denvers and flat irons.
Yeah,
Um,
choices.
how can you go wrong there? Those are the ribeyes of the chuck.
Yeah, yeah, I love
So
it. People don't know that. I mean, most people have never heard of a flat iron,
yeah.
and it's an affordable cut. It's one of the most tender cuts on the animal, and yeah, you're totally right. Like, while you're upcycling all this stuff, we should be utilizing the
Yeah.
whole animal on the backside.
And that's the thing. Like a good butcher can add $200 to $300 to that carcass with beautiful cutting. So you add four chuck eyes or six chuck eyes. If
Yeah.
they're not cutting that front end of that chuck into chuck eyes for you, like that customer's losing out.
Oh yeah,
Um, you,
100%.
if you're not fabricating a Merlot out of that round, like people
Yeah.
go nuts over a Merlot. Or have you ever had an oyster shell?
What is that?
Yeah,
No.
so there's one butcher in the entire state of Wyoming that will do an oyster shell, and an oyster shell will blow your mind. There's only two on the whole animal. It's very high up in the hip towards the hip socket.
Yeah.
And it takes an extra little bit of fabrication, but it's a what it would remind you a lot of looking at a flat iron with some of that, like, is that marbling or is that on the out, like what's that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And when you cook it down and it's like a suety almost fat on it,
Okay.
when that suety type fat melts in, it's a small steak. You're
How big
like,
is it?
whoa.
Really?
Yeah, I cook the oyster shells when we have some friends over and they're like, never heard of it.
Never, no.
Yeah.
So what if you had besides the oyster shell, if you had one cut on the animal that you were going to cook uh for one of your best friends, what would it be? Could be anything.
Yeah, strip loin, New York.
You like the strip? Yeah,
Yeah.
you like the
Yeah,
strip?
it's so versatile.
Yeah, I
Pan
agree.
sear it, throw it on the grill. I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
guys cook it in the toaster. Like it's awesome. It's all and
Oh, wow.
it's a high enough in steak that people are like, wow, I like this.
Yeah,
But it's not so complicated. Like an oyster shell or a flat iron, don't ever go past like medium rare. There's some guidelines there.
we
Ribeye,
we say that with the flat iron, we always say that you can cook that to medium well, and it's still going to be tender. So we always say that, like, that's a great one for your mother-in-law who always wants a well done steak or whatever, right? So, like, that's the cut that we take to them. Actually, that's on one of our.
yeah, and I would tend to agree with that. I would say maybe medium, where most people are going to go just a little past that, a couple degrees past it anyway. I'd say
Yeah.
I would tend to agree with that one. Yeah. Um, I always encourage people like a tri-tip.
Yeah,
If you're going to have a bunch of people over, get a handful of tri-tips because now you've got every variation of doneness within one piece of meat, like beautiful piece of meat, right?
that's a great point. Yeah, no, you're right. And the tri-tip still, it's more popular now, but it's still a more affordable cut,
Yeah.
than just than buying a big bone-in ribeye or something like that. So I think, yeah, you're right with that. Gosh,
Yeah, there's
I
so
love it.
much fun. And I dry cure all of my eye of round.
How do you do it?
Yeah, so if you've never had an eye of round, that's another one I encourage people to get. If you're not going to dry cure it, like what I make a braciola out of it, because
What is that?
braciola is a gateway drug to dry curing meat. So
Nice.
make jerky and then make biltong and then graduate to braciola.
Really?
Yeah, so you're gonna salt cure it you're gonna do your seasoning and your salt mixture for anywhere from 10 days to 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then you're just gonna rinse that off so you don't have that super concentrate and hang it up. Especially like where you are, you could do it this time of year in a cool room. You have a
Really?
lot more humidity. It's too dry for me right now. I have to do it in the winter.
Okay.
Yeah, keep that humidity 55 degrees, 55% humidity, let it
And
hang. Yeah.
you just let it hang? Do you cook it afterwards? What do you do?
No, it's gonna be along the lines of what am I trying to say? I want to say a pancetta,
Prosciutto?
a
Yeah.
prosciutto. Yeah, it's the beef prosciutto. Um,
Really?
Yeah, so you're only investing like 8 to 12 weeks in this process rather than a year for a
Yeah,
prosciutto, you know?
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's cool. Cause yeah, the eye round, we talk about that. Of course, it's great for the roast beef. We on I think on one of our last podcasts, we asked, could you smoke an A5 Wagyu eye round?
I saw that
Like
one.
dope,
Yeah,
actually, like we should try that,
yeah,
because it's probably an affordable cut. I mean, what are they doing with the eye round, with the A5 eye round?
yeah. Yeah, and I think that would be a oh, what am I gonna our carpaccio as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ooh,
why not on that? That's
man.
a beautiful cut.
Yeah.
I think you had the sirloin out the one time. That A5 sirloin was beautiful.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, some of that A5. I mean, all the A5 looks great, but
Yeah,
that's where we get the most pushback with talking about Wagyu beef. People are like, "It's all fat. It's terrible. It's gross." And it's
yeah,
like, well, hold on. Just all you need is an ounce. How about you try it first, and then
yeah,
let me know what you think. Right? If you try it and it's well prepared, it's amazing. But like, and both of us, we don't want to eat A5 every night, man. I want to have a nice, full blood or F1 cross, or
yeah.
just a great, just a great New York strip, or a great we have some beautiful prime Denvers that in our case that just look amazing, and it's like just an easy griller, or a fat on tri-tip. Man, we love all that stuff. We love utilizing the whole cow. We go crazy on bobettes and skirts and all that stuff, man.
Oh yeah. When you have somebody introduce somebody to a bavette for the first time, even like we started doing Thor's hammers for people, and
What
the
is that exactly?
so it's just a shank that's been Frenched.
Yeah, so it's just
And
a old shank.
yeah, and so a lot of people, I think it's the show of it all that
Yeah,
they think it's when you try and talk somebody into like usabuco, they're like,
yeah,
no, that sounds complicated. But when you tell this guy like literally all you have to do is put this gigantic shank with the handle coming out of it on the smoker, and
yeah.
when your buddies come over and you slam it on the table and the meat like literally falls off, and
That,
you've now taken all that marrow, if you have it in a pan or in some foil, and
yeah.
you have integrated all that marrow back into your smoke, you're a hero now.
You're a fucking hero, dude.
Yeah, like
Absolutely, dude.
people just love
That's
you and they
great.
go, "What is this?" You can go, "Yeah, it's like a Thor's hammer." You don't have to tell them it's the front leg,
That's
right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's about marketing and making it,
Yeah,
normal again to the consumer. And you're right about the Osabuco. There, in the wintertime we sell it. It's great, but
yeah.
gosh, man, like it's you gotta know what you're doing. You gotta want to have the time to break that down. But I think more people would be a little bit more open to it if you just showed them this big old Thor's hammer, man.
The
It's like
the
it's like a tomahawk, right? It's a tomahawk ribeye, right? It's a bone-in
yeah,
ribeye, but it's got the
yeah.
got the bone.
Well, and
So
and that's another one. Like the tomahawk is literally the Kardashian of the meat world, right? Um, so they,
I love.
for the good, if somebody's like, "Oh, we have tomahawks," I'm like, "Ah, do you have a flat iron? That'd be cooler."
That's awesome, dude. We
So
love we do tomahawks here for sure. But people love it. We always say, but we tell them like legit, like if you want to walk into your barbecue like a fucking hero, then
right,
then let's do that. But if you just want to have a great big rib, just get the big old bone in ribeye if that's what you're looking for. You don't got to pay
yeah,
for the extra bone. But
yeah.
yeah, it's fun, right? It's fun to go in
And
there
there
and
are there
do
are
your thing, right?
occasions where, yeah, like
Yeah,
I got a picture of me like holding up two of them walking into a restaurant, and people were like standing back, and yeah, so there are. I don't hate on them too much, but I would rather have the short ribs.
exactly. It's like the big margarita at those
Yeah,
restaurants
do
walking
it
through.
do it once. Yeah, do it
Yeah,
on your birthday. It's fun. Be,
it's
be
it's
American, keep the bone, take it home and hang it on your wall or something crazy.
No, man. No, you're totally right about that. But let's utilize the whole cow. There's
Yeah.
so many great cuts, man. And sometimes when I just get a nice skirt steak, I just blow myself away. I'm like, oh my god, I just grilled this freaking outstanding skirt steak, and it's some of the best meat that I'll ever have, and it's a super affordable cut, and that's why I don't think people understand. Right? They might say, "Oh, wow, that ribeye is really expensive." Yeah, but you can get a $20 skirt steak that feeds 3 people,
Right.
and a lot of people can't afford that for dinner, and so that's a great alternative to getting a $60 crazy ribeye.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
and again, like if people haven't, back to the eye of round, if people haven't had that as a steak, do
yeah,
not tell them what it is. Marinate it in a little acid that's going to help break it down a little bit. Throw
good
it on
point.
the grill really quick and just don't tell them what it is. They will argue with you that it's some low end New York that they've never heard of.
Yeah,
Like
that's
literally people are blown away if you prepare that eye of round, and it's like cheaper than ground beef.
yeah, that's true. It is about the preparation, and that's a huge thing that we got to get more into. I think on this podcast, just in general, is telling people how to prepare these crazy cuts that they may not
Yeah.
have had before, because that's one way to get people to try new things, and instead of it going to ground, man, let's cut up some steaks, and that's I don't I like to toot the Wagyu horn a little bit, but that's a great thing about Wagyu as well, is that there's
Oh
so many
yeah.
more steakable items,
Yeah.
people cutting beautiful steaks off the leg that nobody would ever try, even with a prime animal. So there's that's I think is going to change a little bit of the meat industry in the future, but and
It
that's
is.
just
And there are so many more producers even going for that F1 cross with the Wagyu in there just
yeah,
because of that and that demand. Like you look at the carnivore community, that demand for high fat beef in their diet, they're craving that. They're loving that Wagyu cross just because they can that more steak, more fat, love it. Like
more,
good,
yeah, and
good.
good
Yeah,
monounsaturated fat too.
yeah,
Yeah. Are
yeah.
you on the carnivore diet, or do you
I
just
am.
yeah, you are. So how do you feel? Like when did you get started? What's that about?
I love it. So that was actually back to the beef roundup. I listened to Dr. Anthony Chafee, the plant-free MD, on YouTube all the time. Love that dude.
Yeah.
And I reached out to him. I was like, okay, here's a dude that eats a lot of steaks, and I have a steak judging competition. Why don't I invite him? So I reached out to him. Super great guy. He actually like reads all of his messages, and he was like, dude, this sounds awesome, but you do realize I live in Australia, right? So I, s- you miss all the shots you don't take, and so I was like, yeah, thank you. If you ever find yourself in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming in late August, come by for a steak, right? And he did. He texted me back like 3 weeks later. He goes, dude, you're never gonna believe this. I got booked to speak at it was some sort of brain surgery convention in San Diego. He's like, it's the weekend before your event. Can I still come to your event? I was like,
Oh,
yeah,
yes, please.
please.
Dude.
So he came to the event. I don't know if you've ever met him in person. He's a monster. I mean, he's just like he walked in. My wife had never watched any of his videos, and I was on the other side of the building doing something to get ready, and she calls me and she's like, your Australian guy's here."
I
He,
can
like,
tell.
when he walks in, right? He's that dude.
Yeah.
And nicest guy you'd ever meet. Like he sat there and he judged all of our steaks. He was like, "Man, this is one of the coolest things I've done. Thank you for inviting me." Not only is he brilliant, but he's this massive specimen and just super nice. And he came out to the house the next morning, like after the event was over. Yeah, and so we got done with the event, and he said, we were wanting to go see Yellowstone. It was him and his girlfriend, now fiance, Elle. They were like always wanted to do Yellowstone. I said, just
Yeah.
swing by the house. And so carnivore had kind of been on the periphery for me. It was like, oh, that's really cool that these people with eczema and, whatever, irritable bowel, that's cool that but I'm healthy, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm 6 foot, 210 pounds and super active and,
Yeah.
40 years old and I'm good. I love meat too, but I'm not just going to live on it. And he sat here and visited at the table just like we are now, super cool guy. And I was like, all right, man, you can't have this like internationally known dude sitting in your house and raise all the beef and not at least try it. And yeah, after like 3 weeks, I've just never gone back. It's been amazing.
What did he say about it? What did he say? What convinced you? Something that he said.
Just so I would have to eat like 5, 6 times a day. I would eat bacon, eggs, hash browns, toast, coffee, orange juice for breakfast, and that was at like 6:37. And by 11, I was starving.
Yeah,
I couldn't make it to lunch, so I would eat a protein bar.
yeah,
By 12:02, if there wasn't food in front of me, I was pissed off, right?
yeah,
But I was healthy.
yeah,
And everybody just said, "Oh, you work really hard and you have a high metabolism." Like I had checked for diabetes, I had checked for, I'd done all these things. And and when I started carnivore, I started getting the healthy fats and better protein and cutting out the carbs. I eat twice a day now. Like my wife's out of town right now, and yesterday I ate 2 pounds of ground beef. That was it.
yeah. What about
So
vegetables? Don't you miss vegetables?
no.
I always wonder. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've never done it.
yeah, and I can't like in some people like really get to where after they've done it long enough they can't go back and I'm at some point because I could go and eat like a full cheese pizza tonight and I'd be fine.
Yeah,
Um, but no, I mean, and I do like my daughters, they bake stuff for county fair and I have a cookie every once in a great while and but yeah, I just I feel so much better and I thank him all the time. I don't think that's probably the greatest way to spread the word. It's not really scalable to go to everybody's house and be like, okay, dude, here you go. But yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't have the sugar crashes. I don't have the cravings. I,
yeah,
I, you know, we do. We have days that are 18, 20 hour days, and I can't be hangry every 3 hours.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's been
Yeah.
cool.
No, I get it, man. There's a lot of ranchers we talk to that do it, that feel great,
Yeah,
and it is easy, maybe a little bit easier on your end with having cows at your disposal, but I mean it's something I've always wanted to try. Maybe I should do it for like a 30-day and kind of see how I feel.
yeah.
I should. I totally should actually. I'm gonna put that on the calendar
All
here.
right, man. Stay in touch. We'll do it. I'll
I
walk you
know.
through it.
Dude, let's do it, man. Well, Tyler, man, we got to wrap it up here. But how can people find you? How can people find you and check out your beef?
Yeah. So anymore, we're just doing custom whole and halves here locally. That was
Yeah,
always about 80, 90% of our business anyway. Now it's 100. But yeah, we've been on a few TV shows and stuff. Got some cool clips on the website. It's wyomingcowboycuts.com and Wyoming Cowboy Cuts on Facebook and Instagram.
nice. Yeah, I'm gonna check it out, man. I mean, I like what you do. I like the word that you're spreading, and I think talking to more people like you hopefully can open up more conversations just about beef and where you get your beef, and maybe get more people to go out and actually meet some farmers and understand what they do, because I think that's really important. Ask them why they do what they do. I think that's a really great question, because once you kind of find that out, you realize there's a lot of ranchers out there that are doing really good stuff that may not have the taglines of organic or regenerative or Wagyu or anything like that, but are doing really, really great stuff. So it's important for us to have these conversations, man. So I really appreciate you and all your crazy stories of the carrot finishes and all that stuff, and all your experience of the beef around the world, man. It was really cool chatting with you.
Yeah, again, thank you for having me, and we'll do it anytime, man. I could rap about beef all day. I love it.
I know, man. Well, I got to get out there, man. We got a
Yeah,
couple people we got to visit in Wyoming. So man, we might have to make a stop here in the next few months.
let's do it.
All right, Tyler. Appreciate you, man. Tyler McCann of Wyoming Cowboy Cuts. Appreciate your time, man, and we'll chat soon.
Take care.
All right, you too. Bye bye.